Every year, on the 17th of March, the entire world turns green, drinks something blue pretending to be green, and toasts the patron saint of Ireland. There's just one small problem. Your man Patrick wasn't Irish, wasn't called Patrick, and almost certainly never saw a snake in his life. Grand. Let's ruin a beloved holiday together. Patrick was born around the year 385 in Roman Britain, which is to say, Britain, the clue, as they say, is in the name. He came from a wealthy family. His father was a deacon, his grandfather a priest, and young Patrick himself was, by his own admission, not especially religious. He was, in fact, a bit of a brat, a privileged Roman-British teenager who, and I'm quoting the man's own writing here, didn't much care for God. So how does a posh British teen end up the national saint of Ireland? Kidnapping, obviously. When he was 16, Irish raiders crossed the sea, grabbed him off his family's estate, and sold him into slavery in Ireland. Welcome to Ireland, Patrick. The hospitality has historically been mixed. He spent 6 years here as a slave, herding sheep on a cold, wet hill, and it was here, freezing and miserable and alone, that he suddenly found religion. Funny how an Irish winter does that to a man. After 6 years, Patrick claims God told him in a dream that a ship was waiting to take him home. So he walked 200 miles to the coast, talked his way onto a boat, and escaped back to Britain. Free at last, reunited with his family, safe. And then this man who was kidnapped, enslaved, and held for 6 years, decided the most sensible thing to do was to go back, voluntarily, to the place that enslaved him, to convert the very people who'd ruined his youth. If you've ever made a questionable decision, take comfort, you have never made this one. He trained as a priest, came back as a missionary, and spent the rest of his life spreading Christianity across Ireland. And here's where the legends start piling up like turf. The most famous story? Patrick drove all the snakes out of Ireland, stood on a hill, raised his staff, and banished every serpent into the sea. Magnificent story. One issue, there were never any snakes. Ireland has been snake-free since the last ice age. The island was cut off by rising seas, before snakes could ever slither over. Patrick driving the snakes out of Ireland is roughly as impressive as me driving the crocodiles out of Galway. You're welcome, by the way. Most historians reckon the snakes were a metaphor for the Druids, the old pagan religion he helped replace, which is a much more interesting story and far harder to put on a novelty t-shirt. Even the name is a bit of a stretch. His birth name was likely Maewyn Succat. Patrick comes from Patricius, the Latin name he took later. So the patron saint of Ireland was a Briton named Maewyn who rebranded himself in Latin. Very on brand for a man about to invent Irish marketing. The shamrock, the story goes, he used its 3 leaves to explain the Holy Trinity to the pagans. Nice story. Also, how are you? No historical evidence he ever did it. It doesn't appear in any writing until well over 1,000 years after he died. And the colour of Saint Patrick? Blue, not green. Saint Patrick's blue was his original colour. The green came later, tangled up with Irish nationalism and the shamrock. So technically, every March, the world celebrates an Irish saint by wearing the wrong colour. But sure, look out. Try telling that to the feller in the green beer hat. Now, allo, before you think this is all a laugh at Patrick's expense, here's the genuinely remarkable part. This British blow-in, this former slave who made the worst return trip decision in history, helped turn Ireland into one of the great centres of learning in the early medieval world. While much of Europe slid into chaos, Irish monasteries copied and preserved manuscripts that might otherwise have been lost forever. And unlike most saints, we actually have his own words, Jubes. 2 letters he wrote survive to this day. Honest, humble, full of doubt. A real man, not a myth. Kidnapped, enslaved, and he chose to come back, not for revenge, but for the people who took everything from him. Say what you like about the snakes, that part's worth a pint. So this March 17th, raise a glass to Maewyn Succat, the British teenager who became the most Irish man who never existed. If you enjoyed having your childhood quietly dismantled, subscribe. Next time, Ireland is older than the pyramids, and somehow nobody mentions it. Mind yourself.